Hey folks, this is the other Barak coming to you live and direct from an undisclosed location. We have a brand new news update from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as well as the Defense Minister talking about what is the on-the-ground reality in Gaza with the ground operation. You don't get this anywhere else. Stick around for both. You cannot miss them. We'll talk after.
הלילה ברצועת עזה העברנו הילוך. צה"ל תופס שטחים, מכה במחבלים, הורס את התשתיות, ואנחנו עושים דבר נוסף. אנחנו תופסים את ציר מורג. זאת תהיה הפילדלפי השנייה, ציר פילדלפי הנוסף. משום שאנחנו עכשיו מבטרים את הרצועה, ואנחנו מוסיפים את הלחץ צעד אחר צעד, כדי שיתנו לנו את חטופינו. וככל שלא ייתנו, כך הלחץ יגבר עד שייתנו. אנחנו נחושים להשיג את יעדי המלחמה, ואנחנו פועלים ללא לאות, עם קו ברור, ועם משימה ברורה. ובעזרת השם, בעזרת חיילינו הגיבורים, אנחנו גם נשיג אותה.
There. The Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz has announced a major expansion of the military operation in the Hamas-run Gaza Strip. That, as he said, the army will seize what he called large areas of the Palestinian territory. The defense chief saying in a statement that Israel would expand its presence in Gaza to destroy and clear the area of terrorists and terrorist infrastructure. Israel restarted the bombing of Gaza on March the 18th and then launched a new ground offensive, ending a nearly 2-month ceasefire in the war with Hamas. Well, I'm joined now on the set by our international affairs editor, Doug Herbert, for more on this. Hi, Doug.
How are you?
We've been reporting then that, Israel says it's going to capture large areas, it's expanding its military operations there. This looks rather like the fully fledged land incursions and the airstrikes that we had in the early days of the war. The Americans also are boosting their activities in the area. You know, is Donald Trump giving Netanyahu a completely free hand or not?
Absolutely. He has a free hand now. The more assertive, aggressive U.S. policy, the carte blanche, the free hand given by Donald Trump to Benjamin Netanyahu, means that he basically can go full speed ahead or whatever speed ahead that he wishes to go. Netanyahu has never really been constrained that much by American, diktat. He's basically always given precedence, it seems, to his right-wing coalition, his right-wing cabinet, and this is exactly what they have wanted to see. While the hostage families have been sort of all but begging on their knees practically for the Israeli government to, end this war, that is, to continue the ceasefire that had been begun back in mid-January. The right-wing members of the cabinet absolutely not have stuck very, very hard and fast to their own dictate that this war cannot end until Hamas is both politically and militarily destroyed, decimated, a task which even many Israeli army officials have privately said is just simply not possible. They are going to exist like a whack-a-mole and bounce up back in some form. There has to be some endpoint, endgame in this war. What we're right now seeing is with Trump's blessing, like I said, Donald Trump's blessing, we are seeing a policy that effectively is right now continuing to demolish, or let's say re-demolish, because Gaza is already essentially a demolition site, to re-demolish Gaza, to force, essentially, all but force the evacuation of Palestinian civilians, the ones that only recently had some glimmers of hope that perhaps there was an end game in sight here and had begun returning to their homes in the parts of Gaza that they had been displaced from, in some cases multiple times of displacement. So there's a sense among the Palestinians here of exhaustion and absolute hopelessness, absolute despair. They're just simply crushed at this prospect that once again, lo and behold, they are being subjected to a ground offensive, which re-began. Airstrikes, daily airstrikes. We don't know how much land will be seized. What we do know is there had already been a buffer around Gaza before this war in the north and south. That buffer zone has now been expanded and will probably be expanded further, especially along that so-called Netzarim corridor that runs east to west in the middle of Gaza. That's going to be expanded to these no-go security zones, which effectively also, and this is where Netanyahu and Trump visions meet, rendering Gaza essentially uninhabitable and raising the prospect of further Palestinian evacuations and Donald Trump's vision of a, quote, Riviera of the Middle East in Gaza.
And a lot of Israelis do not back this resumption of intense or more intense military activities in Gaza, particularly the families of the hostages who fear that that will not help their situation. One of the reasons Netanyahu has decided to do this is because he is under such domestic pressure. Can you give us an idea of what is going on, what is influencing Netanyahu's decision to do this?
What's going on right now is he's just had to retract his choice for the replacement of the Shin Bet, the domestic internal security. Fired unprecedented action in the history of Israel, especially a country at war right now, firing its chief because why? That initial chief had basically launched a probe against Benjamin Netanyahu, which has become known as Qatargate, which some liken to Israel's Watergate in Israel. And what was that? That was a probe into accusations that some of Netanyahu's senior top officials, his senior advisors, had entered into contacts with Qatar, right? Qatar basically taking bribes from them, taking monetary incentives, if you will, from them, a corruption investigation, basically, and that Netanyahu was most likely aware of it since these are his senior aides. The reason it's so controversial is, Qatar has sort of two faces depending on where you stand in Israel. Yes, Qatar is a country that has been trying to marshal along and those ceasefire talks, those now collapsed ceasefire talks, and has been playing, been a key mediator along with Egypt and the U.S. in trying to put, the U.S. until recently, trying to put an end to those talks, but also perceived by much of the Israeli Republic population as the country that also gave safe harbor to Hamas, let the senior officials of Hamas live in Doha, basically were the people who were friends with the terrorists, as Israel would say, the Hamas organization. So Qatar is obviously very controversial. Anything having to do with Qatar and Israel is going to raise and set off a lot of red alarms. But the main thing is there's a perception, and more than that for some, that Netanyahu fired his domestic internal security chief, unprecedented action, merely because he was trying to investigate possible ties between Netanyahu's senior aides and perhaps by extension Netanyahu himself. Even though he was not named in the probe, the fact that his aides are implicated is already spreading like wildfire, the ramifications of this potential probe right now. So he's really under the gun, and Netanyahu knows this is serious. He abruptly left his corruption trial on a completely separate matter on Monday in order to go to give some testimony at this investigation, at this hearing into the Qatargate probe. So a lot of legal pressures here. Once again, the Israeli government in recent days, on another front, repassed a law that gives the Israeli government, Netanyahu, precedence in some cases over the courts on judicial matters and judges, which has been the whole judicial reform that was extremely controversial and drew mass demonstrations on the eve of this war. So he's really facing mounting pressure on the domestic front, and it doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon, especially Qatargate. It seems that this is going to intensify as it sort of picks up momentum across the Israeli press and the international press.
So anytime that Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu takes a move forward with any action in regards to war, he gets condemned for it, even by many of the family members of the hostages who still have their loved ones, 59 of them, some alive and some dead in the Gaza Strip. I understand that. I've been saying that I understand that. But anytime he takes a side, it's completely condemned. And I'm really saying this with like full honesty. What I've tried to do throughout the past year and a half is attempt to place myself a little bit, because it's impossible to just put myself in his shoes. There's no such thing as putting yourself in the prime minister's shoes of any place in the world. Just attempting to think about the different things he has stacked on his desk when he wakes up in the morning, given the fact that he's in the middle of a war, but at the same time he has to, quote unquote, run a country. The same with any president, any king, prince, prime minister, queen, what have you. People don't always take the opportunity to ask themselves, is there another reason or purpose behind a move such as X, Y, and Z? And in this case, attempting to take over this new corridor. If you look at the geography of the Gaza Strip, this being between Rafah and Khan Yunis, this could disrupt Hamas's ability to continue to smuggle in weapons into Gaza to kill Israelis and Jews. It's also a way to potentially stop them from having the ability to take hostages back into the Gaza Strip. This is a tactic that they've used since way back, even Gilad Shalit in 2014, obviously when he was released. But what they did on October 7th was take 250 of them, where they've created themselves so many different points of access to be able to smuggle weapons, smuggle hostages, smuggle anything else, smuggle people out, whether it's into Egypt, whether it's any other way possible, because we know this. If it is not now, when is it the time to apply maximum pressure? To end the war. You have to single these people out and not let them continue to do what they're promising to do. No more smuggling of weapons, no more taking hostages, no more having the leverage. There needs to be pressure applied. Sorry, that's how war works. War works that way. You have to apply pressure if you want to win a war. And you have to apply pressure when the other side instigated the whole thing in the first place. Let's not forget who started this war. I'm not here to say that I agree with everything that he's doing. If my family member was taken, I would be spending my entire life, I've said this the whole time, trying to fight for their awareness, their return, all of the other people, all of the other families. But it's not as simple as just saying it's his fault or it's her fault or it's both or one or the other. Let's not forget who Bibi has to negotiate with. He has to negotiate with people that are not willing to negotiate. Attempt to do that yourself. Try to do that yourself. Try to make a business deal with somebody who's already not in the deal to begin with. And they're not even willing to entertain the idea of having a deal. That's who Hamas is. That is today's update. Thank you so much for all your support. I'll see you next video. If you want to continue the conversation, you can support my work for free. Discord does not cost a thing. It is the best way to connect with me and others who are seeking the truth. The link is in the description. But if you want to take it one step further, my Patreon gives you access to the Israel you don't see, uncovering the untold stories of what mainstream media does not show you. The link is in the description and it helps me to continue this work. Or if you're just looking to help this thing go, PayPal and Buy Me a Coffee is a really easy way to support me. This channel, this work does not happen without all of you. Thank you. I love you. I'll see you next time.